Welcome. Tonight, we travel back far across oceans and centuries to a world that was painted as paradise, but rarely lived as one. The Dutch East Indies, what we now call Indonesia, was once the beating heart of a vast colonial empire, a place where fragrant spices drifted on humid breezes, where jungle islands met warm turquoise seas. The brochures, if there had been any, might have promised sun-drenched days, golden trade, and exotic comfort. But beneath that image was a world of discomfort, quiet suffering, relentless labor, and complicated lives both native and foreign. In this episode, we'll drift through the daily reality of those who toiled on sugar plantations. We'll examine the life of one man who reshaped the Indies through sheer force of will, Jan Petersoon Cohen. We'll visit lost forts, crumbling in the humid silence of forgotten islands. And we'll step inside the governor's mansion, where luxury and paranoia lived side by side. It's a story of tropical heat and emotional cold, of beauty and burdens. And it begins not in a mansion, but under the sun. Why it sucked to be a laborer on a sugar plantation. Imagine you awaken before the sun, not to birdsong, but to the rustle of dry leaves and the hum of insects, already thick in the morning air. The roof above you is thatched, the floor is dirt. The air, even before sunrise, is damp with the heaviness of a tropical night. You haven't slept well. Few do. The mosquitoes made sure of that. You are a laborer on a sugar plantation in the Dutch East Indies, sometime in the 18th century. You don't own the land you walk. You don't grow food for yourself. The sugarcane fields stretch far beyond your line of sight, endless and shimmering silver in the early light. They aren't beautiful to you. They are endless, and each day they must be tamed. The tools you use are simple machetes dulled from overuse, worn baskets, calloused hands. Your back aches before you even begin, and there is no concept of a weekend. The days are long. Not metaphorically, literally. You begin at dawn, and the work continues until the sky turns a deep tropical blue, then black. The sun doesn't just shine. It bears down, pressing against your skin. You sweat constantly. Your shirt, if you have one, clings to your body like a second skin, soaked and stiff with salt. And still, you keep cutting. The sugarcane is sharp. Its edges slice, invisibly at first, until the sting of sweat in the wound reminds you that you're bleeding. There's no bandage. There is no nurse. What happens if you fall ill? If your leg gives out? There is no sick leave. There is no help. Your absence is noted. Perhaps punished, perhaps replaced. You're not entirely a slave, but you're not free either. In some places, you're an indentured worker. In others, you're forced through coercion, debt, or inherited obligation. Food is basic rice, maybe some salted fish, watery vegetables. You eat quickly, while the overseer watches. You are always being watched. The overseers are not quiet. Their voices carry across the fields. So is the crack of the whip. Punishment isn't daily, but it's expected. And its possibility hangs in the air like the humidity itself. At night, your body aches in places that have no name. You do not speak of escape. There is nowhere to go. The jungle is dense. The sea is far. The plantations are everywhere. Some laborers speak in hushed tones about the past, about villages inland, about life before the Dutch arrived, before VOC merchants divided the land with naps and trade routes. But those are stories, dreams, and dreams are fragile here. As the stars blink faintly overhead and the crickets begin their nightly rhythm, you lie back on your mat. Tomorrow will be the same fields, the same heat, the same silence. This was the price of sugar. The strange rise of Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, the governor who burned his way to glory. You were not meant to remember his name. Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, a man born not to royalty or legacy, but to a modest merchant family in the cold Protestant city of Hoorn in the northern Dutch Republic. It was 1587. Europe was trembling, caught between rising empires and rising oceans. The Dutch had not yet earned their golden age, but Cohen was already restless. As a boy, he studied trade ledgers and bookkeeping, not poetry, not war. Commerce was his cathedral, and it gave him his God. The Dutch East India Company, also called the VOC. You could say he worshipped it. At just 20 years old, he sailed to Asia as a junior accountant, pale-skinned, stiff, and impatient. The voyage was brutal. 4 months at sea, salt pork, scurvy, bodies thrown overboard. And when he landed in Bantam, on the island of Java, he saw opportunity. The East Indies weren't peaceful. They were competitive. The Portuguese had arrived first. The English soon followed. And the local kingdoms, the Javanese, the sultans of Mataram, the leaders of Ambon and Banda, were not passive. They traded, but they also resisted. Cohen wasn't interested in waiting. The merchant who wanted power in 1618, at just 31, Cohen became the 4th Governor-General of the Indies. Most men would have celebrated, built slowly, negotiated with local rulers, written polite letters to Europe. Cohen earned things instead. He believed the VOC must control the spice trade, not participate in it. And that meant controlling people. The Banda Islands were rich in nutmeg, a rare spice. It could be sold in Amsterdam for 300x its cost. The Bandanese people refused to give the Dutch a monopoly. They had traded freely for centuries with Malays, Chinese, Arabs, even the hated Portuguese. So in 1621, Cohen returned to Banda with soldiers, cannons, and orders. The locals resisted, so Cohen gave the order. Over the course of months, villages were burned, men were executed, women and children enslaved. Some fled to the mountains. Others were hunted. By the end, an entire culture had been erased. Cohen replaced them with Dutch settlers, indentured Javanese, and slaves from all corners of Asia. Banda had become a company plantation. Its people ... ghosts, but he wrote letters home back in Amsterdam. Cohen wrote regularly to the VOC directors. He spoke of order, efficiency, and justice. He warned of Portuguese treachery. He justified brutality with ledgers. To him, nutmeg didn't smell like spice. It smelled like destiny. He built Batavia, the city that would become Jakarta, a European capital carved into the swampy banks of Java's coast. He laid out Dutch canals, introduced brick buildings, and created laws that mirrored home. But the water was foul. Disease was rampant, and few settlers could survive the climate for long. Still, Cohen insisted. Batavia was his, the city of his name. He died at just 42 in 1629 during a siege by the Sultan of Mataram. Fever took him like so many others, and then he was forgotten, or not for centuries. Jan Pieterszoon Cohen was both hero and villain. A statue stood in his hometown of Hoorn. It still does, though protests have grown. Some call him a visionary, others a war criminal. Most have never heard of him. But every time nutmeg is mentioned in history, every time Batavia is spoken in Dutch schoolrooms, every time the Banda Islands appear in a footnote, you'll find Cohen quiet, cold, and waiting. And now, let us move from the burning city into deeper shadows, to a place where the walls still whisper. We travel to the lost forts of Banda Nera. The lost forts of Banda Nera, where the walls still whisper. It begins with wind. Salt wind, warm and sharp, sweeping over the Banda Sea. Banda Nera is small, barely a scratch of green and stone in the heart of the Indonesian archipelago. From the sky, it looks idyllic. Palm trees, volcanic ridges, cobalt waters. A perfect picture of forgotten paradise. But step closer, and the ruins begin to speak. Here, on these cliffs and in these jungles, stand the skeletons of empires. Dutch empires, Portuguese ambitions, English failures, and native resistance, carved not in parchment, but in stone. Fort Belgica, the silent giant. The largest of them all is Fort Belgica. Octagonal, thick-walled, and massive, it rises from the hill like a forgotten god. Built first by the Portuguese, and expanded by the Dutch in 1611, it was meant to project power. A star-shaped fortress surrounded by a dry moat, designed to repel cannon fire and uprisings alike. You can still walk its battlements today. Stone pathways, echoes under your feet. The air smells of moss and rusted iron. Inside, it's quiet. Birdsong drifts through the broken windows. The cells, dark, narrow, and lined with chains, hold no prisoners now. But the walls remember. Here, captives from the Banda massacre may have waited for death. Here, rival traders were held for ransom. Here, orders were whispered in Dutch, in Portuguese, in Malay, in fear. Outside, the view is almost cruel, so beautiful, so calm. But beauty is often the disguise of violence. And Fort Belgica wore that mask well. The forgotten forts. Not far away lies Fort Nassau, older and more decayed. Less a fortress now, more a pile of moss-covered stones. Once the VOC's first stronghold on Banda, it was built too low, too vulnerable. When Belgica was finished, Nassau was abandoned. Its cannons were left to rust, its doors to rot, its name to be buried in the jungle. Further still, on other islands, are the ruins of Fort Hollandia, Fort Concordia, and others. Most are nameless, now swallowed by vines, guarded by silence. They were not built to last forever, only long enough to conquer, to extract nutmeg, to control. The ghosts of Banda walk these islands today, and you may hear only wind and waves. But beneath the silence is a tension thick, like the tropical heat. The Banda Islands were once home to tens of thousands of people, traders, artisans, farmers, children. After the massacres of 1621, barely 1,000 Bandanese remained. The VOC imported slaves and laborers from Java, Sulawesi, and beyond to work the plantations. These new populations had no memory of the land, no roots in the old temples, no stories of the forests. Banda became a ghost island, a spice graveyard, perfumed with nutmeg and sorrow. And yet the forts remain, cracked but standing, crumbling but proud, their stones whispering not of glory, but of cost. And now, let us shift one last time into the world of the privileged, into the cool halls of the governor's mansion, where the ceiling fans spun above velvet couches, and the gardens were watered even during droughts. This is where luxury met loneliness, and paranoia sat quietly in every room. Inside the colonial mansion, luxury, loneliness, and the quiet paranoia of power. You step off the dirt path and into another world. The whitewashed walls of the governor's mansion shimmer faintly in the sun. 2 floors, shuttered windows, a wide veranda designed not for the native climate, but to replicate Europe in the tropics. Inside, the air is cooler, not because of breeze, but because of silence. You remove your shoes, not out of respect, but instinct. There is always someone listening, a life of comfort. With no rest, if you lived here, you would never sweat. Your uniform would be starched, your linens freshly boiled. Servants always native, always quiet move through the corridors, bringing cooled tea, wiping beads of condensation from silver trays. You do not fetch your own food. You do not wash your own clothes. You do not even open your own letters. But you are not at peace. The candles are trimmed every night, the clocks wound with care. But outside the gates, the jungle thickens, and beyond that, tens of thousands who do not love you, who do not want you here. Each morning you dress with care, a white coat, a hat that itches. You sit at your grand desk imported from Amsterdam. Behind you hangs a map of the archipelago, covered in red ink and Dutch script, lines drawn with confidence, but not security. The mansion smells of wood polish and clove cigarettes. The windows are always open, but only just. You read letters from Batavia, from The Hague, reports, demands, requests, threats, and still you sign orders. More sugar from Java, more spices from Ambon, more punishment in Banda. Each evening you walk the garden path. It is beautifully kept, neat hedges, lotus ponds, carved benches. But you don't sit. because behind every bush could be a servant with a knife, a merchant with a grudge, or no one at all. Just your imagination. The family that followed. Or didn't some colonial governors brought their wives? Some their children. Some came alone. Those who brought family faced a different discomfort. Illness, boredom, melancholy. Children, raised in the tropics, caught fevers easily. They would lie listless on cane beds, under mosquito nets, barely breathing. Doctors came slowly and often brought leeches instead of cures. Wives complained in long letters, home letters stained with sweat and ink. The dresses they brought mildewed in the humid air. Their parasols did little against the sun. Their salons were lonely. Books helped, so did piano music. But nothing cured the isolation of ruling from a hill, in a house no one wanted, in a land that would never be home. And when the music stops, at night you hear the jungle. Monkeys bark in the distance. The sea murmurs against the reef. But in your room, beneath your wide mosquito net, you lie awake. The mansion groans. The shutters rattle. You remember the rumors of rebellion, of servants who poisoned stew, of neighbors who vanished, and yet you stay, because the VOC promised fortune, because you wrote your name on the walls, because to return home now would be defeat. So you drift into sleep, not knowing what morning will bring, but knowing deep down that this mansion, this fortress of comfort, is built on the backs of those who can never enter it. Closing thoughts. A paradise by design and delusion. The Dutch East Indies was sold as a paradise, for spices, for profit, for prestige. But paradise, real or imagined, has always had a price. Behind every box of nutmeg was a field worker, cutting until their hands bled. Behind every fort was a village burned. Behind every mansion wall, a sleepless governor. The jungle does not forget, and neither should we. Good night, and sleep well.